Hi, I'm Miles Porter. If you're still awake right now, that's perfectly fine. Sometimes the best way to fall asleep is to let someone else do the thinking for a while. Tonight we're on a train, a night train, heading south from Cairo, following the Nile all the way down into the desert. The year doesn't matter. The time doesn't matter. What matters is that the cabin is warm, the seat is soft, and the wheels are already turning. Outside the window, the city lights of Cairo are thinning out. You can still see the glow of them on the horizon, a kind of amber haze, but it's getting fainter. Cairo is enormous. More than 20 million people live in that city. It spills out in every direction, a tangle of apartment blocks and minarets and highways, all of it clinging to the edge of the Nile like a vine wrapped around a pole. But from here, from the train, it just looks like light, a warm, soft light, slowly disappearing behind us. Ahead of us, there is only the dark shape of the river and the stars. I've been looking forward to this trip, not because of where we're going exactly, but because of what I want to tell you about. Tonight, I want to talk about the gods of ancient Egypt, the old ones, the ones with the heads of jackals and falcons and ibises, the ones who sailed boats across the sky and weighed the hearts of the dead on golden scales. I think you'll like them. They're not in any rush. Neither are we. The cabin smells faintly of old wood and clean linen. There is a small lamp above the window, and it casts a warm circle of light on the seat. Everything else is shadow. The train sways a little as it picks up speed, and you can feel the rhythm of the wheels settling into their pattern. Click, clack, click, clack, like a heartbeat that belongs to something much larger than us. If you're lying down, that's good. If your eyes are open, that's fine too. You don't need to follow every word. I'll just talk, and the train will carry us. And if you drift off somewhere along the way, I'll keep going, just in case. Egypt. The ancient Egyptians called their country Kemet, which means the Black Land, not because it was dark or sinister, but because of the rich black silt that the Nile deposited on the fields every year during the annual flood. That silt was the foundation of everything. It made the soil fertile. It grew the wheat, the barley, the flax, the papyrus. Without it, Egypt would have been nothing but desert. The desert, by contrast, was called Deshret, the Red Land, the barren, lifeless expanse that stretched away on both sides of the narrow green valley. 95% of Egypt's population, even today, lives within a few miles of the Nile. The river is about 4,130 miles long in total, making it one of the longest rivers in the world. It flows from south to north, which is unusual for a river of that size. The ancient Egyptians oriented their entire world around this fact. Upper Egypt was in the south because it was upstream. Lower Egypt was in the north because it was downstream, near the delta where the river fans out into the Mediterranean. A pharaoh who ruled both halves wore the double crown. The white crown of Upper Egypt nested inside the red crown of Lower Egypt. The Nile begins in the highlands of East Africa. Two tributaries, the White Nile and the Blue Nile, come together near the city of Khartoum in Sudan. From there, the river flows northward through the desert, picking up very little additional water along the way until it reaches the Mediterranean. Thomas Cook and Son started offering steamboat cruises on the Nile in 1875. The stretch between Cairo and Aswan is still one of the most popular tourist routes in the world. But tonight, we're not on a cruise. We're on a train. And the first thing the Nile makes me think about is the gods. Let's start at the beginning. Not the beginning of Egypt exactly, but the beginning of everything. The way the ancient Egyptians told it, there was a time before the sun, before the river, before the first grain of sand. They had a word for it. They called it noon. Noon was the dark water. Not a lake or an ocean exactly, but something older than either. It was the nothing that existed before anything. Imagine a darkness so complete that even the idea of light hasn't been invented yet. That's noon. No up, no down, no edges, just water and silence and waiting. And then, out of that darkness, something happened. A small hill of land rose up out of the water. The Egyptians called it the Benben, the first mound. It appeared the way an island might appear when a flood recedes, slowly, quietly. And on top of that mound, there was a god. His name was Atum. He was the first. In the city of Heliopolis, which the Egyptians called Unu, just northeast of where Cairo stands today, the priests said that Atum had created himself. He just was. He emerged from the dark water, stood on that first mound of earth, and looked out at the nothingness surrounding him. He was alone, and the world was empty. Atum is sometimes shown as an old man wearing the double crown of Egypt. Sometimes he takes the form of a serpent. But what matters is what he did next. He created 2 children. Some myths say he sneezed them into existence. Others say he spat. The Egyptians were not always delicate about the mechanics of creation. Their names were Shu and Tefnut. Shu was the god of dry air, the space between things, the breath that fills your lungs. Tefnut was the goddess of moisture, of rain and mist and dew. One was the breath, and the other was the water in the breath. There is a story that Shu and Tefnut wandered off into the darkness of noon and got lost. Atum, alone again and frightened, sent his eye out to find them. The eye of Atum searched through the primordial waters and eventually brought the 2 children back. Atum was so relieved that he wept, and the tears that fell from his eyes became the first human beings. The Egyptian word for tears, remet, is similar to the word for people, remet. It is one of those puns that the Egyptians loved, where the sound of one word contains the meaning of another. Together, Shu and Tefnut had 2 children of their own. Their son was Geb, the earth. Their daughter was Nut, the sky. And here is where the story gets interesting, because the Egyptians imagined the sky as a woman. Nut was described as a woman arched over the earth, her fingers touching the western horizon, her toes touching the east. Her body was covered in stars. Every night she swallowed the sun, and it passed through her body, and every morning she gave birth to it again. And below her, lying flat on his back, was Geb, the earth, the ground beneath our feet. He was sometimes shown with green skin because vegetation grows from the earth. Geb and Nut loved each other. They loved each other so much that they held each other in a permanent embrace, the sky pressed flat against the earth, with no room between them for anything to exist. Their father, Shu, had to step between them and physically hold them apart. He lifted Nut up above his head, and she arched her body into the dome of the sky, and Geb lay flat below, and in the space between them, the world was born. This is one of those images that I think about sometimes. A father holding the sky above his head so that there is room for life beneath it. The Egyptians painted it on the ceilings of tombs. You can still see it in the Valley of the Kings, in the tomb of Ramesses VI, more than 3,000 years later. Nut with her starry body stretching across the ceiling, Shu with his arms raised, Geb lying green and patient below. The train rocks gently as we round a slow curve. Outside, the last light of Cairo is gone. There is nothing now but the dark and the stars and the steady sound of the wheels. Now, Nut and Geb had 4 children, and those 4 children are the heart of nearly every story I'm going to tell you tonight. Their names were Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. Those 4 gods, born from the sky and the earth, would shape everything that followed. They would create a kingdom, destroy it, and rebuild it from the ruins. But that story comes later. Together, these 9 deities from Atum down to the 4 children of Geb and Nut formed what the Egyptians called the Ennead, from the Greek word for 9. The Ennead of Heliopolis. They were the first family, the foundation on which all of Egyptian mythology was built. But before I get to the dramas of that family, let me tell you a little about what daily life was like in ancient Egypt. Because the myths didn't exist in a vacuum. They grew out of the rhythms of ordinary people living ordinary lives along the river. The average Egyptian lived in a mud brick house with a flat roof. The walls were thick to keep out the heat. Most houses had just a few rooms, a front room for entertaining, a back room for sleeping, and a kitchen area with a simple clay oven. The roof was often used as additional living space. On hot nights, families would sleep on the roof to catch the breeze coming off the river. The furniture was simple: a low bed, sometimes with a headrest made of wood or stone instead of a pillow, stools, baskets, clay pots. Wealthier families might have painted walls and linen curtains. The Egyptians ate bread and drank beer. These were the staples of the diet, so fundamental that they were used as currency. Workers were paid in bread and beer. Taxes were calculated in grain. A scribe's shopping list from around 1200 before the Common Era includes bread, beer, onions, garlic, dried fish, and dates. They also ate figs, grapes, lentils, and occasionally meat, though beef was expensive and reserved for special occasions or the wealthy. Beer was not like modern beer. It was thick, nutritious, and only mildly alcoholic. It was made by crumbling partially baked bread into water and letting the mixture ferment. Sometimes dates or honey were added for sweetness. It was strained through a basket before drinking. The Egyptians consumed it the way we might drink tea or coffee, as a daily staple rather than an indulgence. Children played with toys. Archaeologists have found spinning tops, dolls with movable limbs, leather balls stuffed with grain, and small animal figures made of clay. They played a board game called Sekhmet, which was so popular that it appeared in tombs alongside the dead. Sekhmet boards have been found in every social stratum, from royal tombs to workers' houses. The game involved moving pieces across 30 squares, with the outcome determined by throwing sticks or knuckle bones. Over time, Sekhmet took on religious significance. It came to represent the journey of the soul through the underworld, and playing it was considered a way of communing with the dead. The Egyptians also loved music. They played harps, lutes, flutes, drums, and a type of oboe called a double reed pipe. Paintings in tombs show musicians performing at banquets, with dancers swaying and clapping. Blind harpists were common in these scenes, and there is a genre of ancient Egyptian poetry called Songs of the Harper that reflects on the brevity of life and the importance of enjoying the present moment. One famous harper's song from the tomb of a priest named Neferhotep says, in essence, "No one has returned from the afterlife to tell us what it is like, so follow your heart while you are alive." The Egyptians kept cats as pets. They kept dogs. They kept monkeys, geese, and even baboons. Cats held a special status because they were associated with the goddess Bastet, the gentle feline deity who protected the home and family. Bastet was originally depicted as a fierce lioness, similar to Sekhmet, but over time she softened into a domestic cat goddess, calm and nurturing. Her cult center was at a city called Bubastis in the Nile Delta, where an annual festival in her honor attracted hundreds of thousands of worshippers. Herodotus, who attended the festival, said that more wine was consumed during the festival of Bastet than during the entire rest of the year. When a household cat died, the family would shave their eyebrows in mourning. Millions of cats were mummified and buried in sacred cemeteries. Archaeologists at Beni Hassan found a cat cemetery containing an estimated 80,000 mummified cats. The Nile's annual flood was the central event of the Egyptian calendar. Each year, between June and September, seasonal rains in the Ethiopian highlands would swell the Blue Nile, and the floodwaters would travel north into Egypt, arriving like clockwork. The river would rise by as much as 8 meters in some places, spilling over its banks and covering the flat agricultural land on either side in a layer of water and rich, dark silt. The Egyptians measured the flood using devices called nilometers. These were stone columns or staircases built into the river at various points, with markings to show the water level. The most famous nilometer was on the island of Elephantine at Aswan, where the Nile enters Egypt from the south. If the flood was too low, the crops would fail and famine would follow. If it was too high, villages would be destroyed. A perfect flood, one that rose to just the right level, was a sign that Ma'at, the cosmic order, was being maintained. The Egyptians attributed the flood to Isis's tears of mourning for Osiris, or to the bodily fluids of Osiris himself, connecting the physical reality of the river to the emotional reality of the myth. When the waters receded, the fields were covered in a layer of fresh, fertile silt. Farmers would plant their crops almost immediately. They grew emmer wheat, barley, flax for linen, and papyrus for writing material. Papyrus grew in the marshy areas of the delta and along the riverbanks. It was harvested, cut into thin strips, laid in overlapping layers, pressed flat, and dried to create a smooth writing surface. A single papyrus roll could be for several meters long. The longest surviving papyrus, the Great Horus Papyrus from the reign of Ramesses III, measures about 41 meters. The train is very steady now. The rhythm of the wheels has become a kind of white noise, a sound so constant that you stop hearing it, and then you notice it again. And it's still there, still the same, still carrying you forward. There were other creation stories, of course. The priests at Memphis said that the god Ptah created the world through the power of speech. He thought of things, and then he said their names, and they came into existence. The priests at Hermopolis, the city of Thoth, said that creation began with 8 primordial deities called the Ogdoad, 4 pairs of gods representing the qualities of the pre-creation water: darkness, invisibility, endlessness, and stagnation. The Egyptians did not see these different stories as contradictions. They held them all at once, the way you might hold several different memories of the same event. Each one was true in its own way. But tonight, let's follow the Ennead. Let's follow the family from Heliopolis, because their story is the one that leads everywhere. For now, let's talk about the sun. Because before Osiris, before Isis, before any of the dramas of gods and kings, there was Ra. And Ra is the engine that makes the whole thing work. Someone in the next car coughs softly. Then it's quiet again. The wheels keep turning. Ra was the sun god, the most powerful deity in the Egyptian pantheon for most of the civilization's long history. By the 5th dynasty, around 2,500 years before the Common Era, Ra had become the supreme god, identified with the blazing noonday sun. His cult center was at Heliopolis, the same city where Atum was worshipped. And over time, the two gods merged into one, Atum-Ra. The Egyptians were comfortable with this sort of fusion. A god could absorb another god the way a river absorbs a tributary, becoming larger without losing the character of either. The Egyptians did not think of the sun as a ball of gas. They thought of it as a god, and not just any god, but a god on a journey. Every morning, Ra was born. He emerged on the eastern horizon in the form of a scarab beetle called Khepri, pushing the sun up out of the darkness the way a dung beetle pushes a ball of dung across the sand. There is something wonderfully practical about that image. The Egyptians saw those beetles rolling their little balls of earth, and they thought, well, someone must be doing that with the sun. The scarab beetle became one of the most common symbols in all of Egyptian art. You can find scarab amulets in every museum with an Egyptian collection. Some are tiny, carved from lapis lazuli or turquoise. Others are large, made of stone, placed over the heart of a mummy for protection. At midday, Ra was in his prime. He took the form of a falcon-headed man with a blazing sun disk on his head, seated in a great boat called the Manjet. This was the day boat, the morning boat, and it sailed across the sky on a river that the Egyptians imagined flowing through the heavens. Some texts say other gods rode with him. Thoth sat nearby, keeping records. Ma'at, the goddess of truth and cosmic balance, stood at his side, because the sun's journey was the most important act of order in the universe. Without it, everything would fall into chaos. The boat moved from east to west, and below it, Egypt turned golden in the light. By evening, Ra was old. He took the form of Atum, the aged man, stooped and weary. The Egyptians called his evening trip Semtet, which means becoming weak. His boat descended toward the western horizon. The Egyptians called the west the land of the dead, because that is where the sun went to die every night. When the sun set, it slipped through a gate or doorway in the horizon and entered the Duat, the underworld. And now the real journey began. The Duat was divided into 12 regions, one for each hour of the night. This journey was described in a text called the Amduat, which means that which is in the afterworld. The earliest copies of the Amduat were carved on the walls of pharaohs' tombs during the New Kingdom. Early fragments have been found in the tombs of Hatshepsut and Thutmose I. For a very long time, only pharaohs were allowed to have this text in their tombs. It was considered that powerful, that sacred. Ra sailed through the 12 hours on a different boat, the Mesektet, the night boat. In the first hour, the waters of the underworld were calm. Goddesses of the night stood on the riverbanks and sang to guide him forward. A goddess called Sau, the smiter of the heads of the enemies of Ra, defended the boat against 6 fire-breathing serpents. In the second hour, the waters began to change. The Nile of the underworld, sometimes called the Wernes, flowed through fertile fields, and Ra's light brought temporary life to the dead who lived there. They could breathe and see for the brief hour that the sunboat passed through their region, and then they returned to darkness. In the third hour, the waters became the waters of Osiris. This made sense to the Egyptians because they believed the Nile originated in the underworld, and Osiris was the god of the afterlife and fertility. The same water that nourished the dead would rise to the surface and flood the fields of the living. By the fourth hour, Ra had reached a place called Imhet, the barren desert land of a hawk-headed god named Sokar. Here, the darkness was so complete that Ra could not see. He had to rely on his own voice, calling out into the blackness to find his way. The sunboat was dragged through the sand because there was no water in this region. It was the lowest point of the journey. The dead here were truly dead. No light, no sound, no hope, except for the passing of Ra's voice in the darkness. In the fifth hour, the landscape changed again. Sand and water mixed together, life and death intermingling. This was considered a place of opposites, where the influence of Ma'at, the goddess of order, was needed to keep the chaos at bay. And in every one of those 12 hours, something was waiting for him. The underworld was full of serpents and demons and gates that would not open unless you spoke the right words. There were guardians with knives. There were spirits who tried to steal the sun. But the worst of them, the one that appeared again and again, was Apophis. Apophis was a serpent, not a little snake, but an enormous one, a creature of pure chaos, as long as the river itself, as vast as the Nile. Every night, Apophis tried to stop the sunboat. It would coil around the boat, or swallow it whole, or simply stare at Ra with a hypnotic gaze that could freeze the sun in its tracks. And every night, the gods on the boat had to fight it off. Here is a thing I find strange and kind of wonderful. The god who was most useful in fighting Apophis was Set. Set, who in other stories is the villain, the murderer of Osiris, the god of storms and chaos. But on the sunboat, Set stood at the prow and drove his spear into Apophis over and over, because chaos, fighting chaos, was the only way to keep the sun alive. The Egyptians lived comfortably with contradictions like that. A god could be a villain in one story and a hero in the next, and both could be true at the same time. Other gods helped too. Mehen, a serpent deity, coiled around the sunboat to protect it. Isis used her magic. Thoth used his spells. It was a group effort every single night to keep the universe running. At midnight, in the deepest part of the underworld, Ra met Osiris. The two gods merged together briefly, the living sun and the dead king becoming one. The Amduat describes Ra transforming into his ram-headed form during this part of the journey. It was in this union, this merging of life and death, that Ra was renewed. His strength returned, his light was rekindled. And by the final hour of the night, Ra emerged from the mouth of a great serpent on the eastern horizon, reborn as Khepri, the scarab, and the sun rose again over Egypt. Every single day, for millions and millions of days. The Egyptians believed this cycle had been going on since the beginning of time and would continue until the end of it. Ra dying and being reborn, the sun setting and rising, the darkness and the light, over and over, like the wheels of a train on a track that has no end. The train has crossed a bridge. You could hear the change in the sound of the wheels, a hollow, resonant hum for a moment, and then the solid click-clack returns. We're passing over one of the Nile's smaller branches. If you look out the window, you might catch the flash of moonlight on water. Then it's gone. If your eyelids are heavy, that's a good sign. That means it's working. Now, let me tell you about Osiris. Because if Ra is the engine that makes the world turn, Osiris is the story that makes the world matter. Osiris was the eldest son of Geb and Nut. He was the first king of Egypt. The myths describe him as tall, with greenish or sometimes black skin, a sign of his connection to vegetation and the fertile soil of the Nile. He wore the white crown of Upper Egypt called the hedjet and carried a crook and a flail, the tools of a shepherd. The crook for guiding, the flail for threshing grain. He was gentle, he was fair. He taught the Egyptians how to grow wheat and barley. He showed them how to make bread and beer. He gave them copper tools to work the earth. Some stories say he put an end to cannibalism, which is a detail that the mythmakers seem to have added to emphasize just how uncivilized Egypt was before Osiris came along. He married his sister, Isis. This sounds strange to us, but among the gods, it was normal. Isis was brilliant. She was a sorceress, a healer, a strategist, and one of the most powerful deities in the entire pantheon. Her name in Egyptian was Aset, which means throne, and the hieroglyph for her name is a picture of a throne. She literally embodied the power of kingship. Her worship spread far beyond Egypt. By the Greco-Roman period, temples to Isis could be found from Britain to Afghanistan. There is even a theory, widely discussed among art historians, that depictions of Isis nursing the infant Horus influenced early Christian images of Mary holding the infant Jesus. Together, Osiris and Isis ruled Egypt, and the land prospered. The Nile flooded on schedule, arriving between June and September each year, fed by seasonal rains in the Ethiopian highlands. The crops grew tall. The people were content. But Osiris had a brother named Set, and Set was not content. Set was the god of storms, of the desert, of disorder and foreign lands. Where Osiris was green and fertile, Set was red and barren. Where Osiris was calm, Set was violent. The Egyptians depicted him with the head of an animal that no one has ever been able to identify. It looks a bit like a donkey, or maybe an aardvark, with a long, curving snout and tall, rectangular ears. Egyptologists call it the Set animal, and after more than a century of study, they still argue about what it's supposed to be. Some think it may be a composite, a creature that doesn't exist in nature, which would be fitting for a god of chaos. Set was jealous of Osiris. Some versions of the myth say it was jealousy of power, a younger brother watching the older one receive the kingdom. Others say it was more personal. There is a story told by the Greek writer Plutarch around the year 100 of the Common Era, that Set's wife Nephthys disguised herself as Isis and seduced Osiris, or that Osiris mistook Nephthys for his own wife. Either way, Nephthys became pregnant. She gave birth to a child and, terrified of what Set would do if he found out, abandoned the baby in the wilderness. Isis found the child and raised him as her own. That child was Anubis. Whether or not Set knew about this betrayal, the myths are clear that he wanted Osiris dead. The train rounds a long, slow curve. The cabin tilts just slightly, and you can feel the weight of the cars behind us, pulling gently. Then we straighten out, and the rhythm resumes. Somewhere outside, a thin strip of cloud passes in front of the moon, and the Nile disappears for a moment, and then the moon comes back, and the river is there again, silver and steady. Here is how Set did it. He was clever about it. According to Plutarch, Set held a great feast and invited Osiris as the guest of honor. 72 accomplices were in on the plot. During the festivities, Set brought out a beautiful chest. It was made of fine wood, decorated with gold and bright paint. He announced that whoever could fit perfectly inside the chest would get to keep it as a gift. One by one, the guests tried. None of them fit. The chest was too long for some, too narrow for others. Then Osiris climbed in, and of course he fit perfectly, because Set had secretly measured his brother's body while he slept, tiptoeing into Osiris's bedroom to take the measurements from head to toe and side to side, and had the chest built to his exact dimensions. The moment Osiris lay down in the chest, Set slammed the lid shut. His accomplices rushed forward. They sealed the chest with lead, nailed it closed, and threw it into the Nile. Osiris, the first king of Egypt, drowned inside a golden coffin, floating down the river that had given his people life. The chest drifted north, out of Egypt, across the Mediterranean, and eventually washed ashore at Byblos, on the coast of what is now Lebanon. A great tamarisk tree grew around it, encasing the chest inside its trunk. The tree grew so large and so beautiful that the king of Byblos, not knowing what was inside, had it cut down and used as a pillar in his palace. And Isis went looking for her husband. This part of the story is long and sad and full of wandering. Isis searched everywhere. She disguised herself as an ordinary woman. She asked questions in every town. She followed rumors. Eventually, she heard about the great tree in Byblos and traveled there. She befriended the queen by becoming a nurse to the royal children. She cared for them with such tenderness and skill that the queen grew to trust her completely. Only then did Isis reveal her true identity as a goddess and ask for the pillar to be split open. Inside the tree, she found the chest. Inside the chest, she found Osiris. She brought his body back to Egypt and hid it in the marshes of the Nile Delta, in a thicket of papyrus reeds near a place the Egyptians called Akbiti, meaning papyrus thicket of the king of Lower Egypt. The Greeks later called this place Chemis. She planned to use her magic to bring him back to life, but Set found the body first. Some versions say Set was out hunting boar by moonlight. He was charging through the marshes when he stumbled upon the hiding place. Other versions say it was simple, bad luck. Either way, he was furious. He tore the body of Osiris into 14 pieces, or 16, depending on which version you follow, and scattered them across Egypt. One piece in Memphis, one in Abydos, one in the Delta, one in Elephantine. He threw them in every direction so that Isis could never reassemble her husband. But Isis did not give up. She and her sister Nephthys, who despite being Set's wife had remained loyal to Osiris, searched every inch of Egypt. They traveled by boat on the Nile, looking along both banks. They searched in cities and in the desert. They found 13 of the 14 pieces. The 14th, his phallus, had been swallowed by a fish, an oxyrhynchus fish, or perhaps a crocodile, and was lost forever. Isis made a replacement out of gold, or wax, or clay, depending on which version you prefer. Then she reassembled her husband's body. She called on Anubis, the jackal-headed god, and Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, to help her. Together, they wrapped the body in linen bandages. They anointed it with oils and resins. They performed the rites of embalming. Osiris became the first mummy, the very first. And ever after, Anubis was known as the Lord of the mummy wrapping, the patron god of embalmers, the protector of the dead. Then Isis used her magic. She transformed herself into a kite, a small bird of prey that the Egyptians associated with mourning because of its plaintive cry, and flew above the body of Osiris, beating her wings to breathe life back into him. It worked, but only briefly, only long enough for one thing. Osiris revived long enough to conceive a child with Isis. Then he passed on, not back to the world of the living, but to the Duat, the underworld, where Ra had promised him he would find peace and contentment. He became the king of the dead, the lord of the afterlife, the judge of souls. And the child that Isis carried was Horus. Someone in the next cabin turns off a light. You can see the change in the darkness, just a slight shift in the quality of the shadow. The train keeps moving. Isis knew that Set would try to kill her child. Horus was the rightful heir to the throne of Egypt, and Set had usurped that throne. A living son of Osiris was a threat to everything Set had gained. So Isis hid. She fled to the papyrus marshes of the delta, to Chemis, and there she raised Horus in secret. The marshes were dense and green, full of birds and crocodiles, and Isis used her magic to keep them hidden. The myths tell us that Horus's childhood was not easy. He was bitten by scorpions. He fell ill. Isis had to use all of her magical knowledge to keep him alive. In one story, she cured him by reciting a spell so powerful that it stopped the sunboat in its tracks, forcing Ra to send Thoth down to help her. Thoth healed the child, and the sun resumed its journey. Even the gods could be inconvenienced by a mother protecting her child. Horus grew up knowing two things. First, that his father had been a great king who ruled justly. Second, that his uncle had murdered him and stolen his throne. When Horus was old enough, he challenged Set for the kingship of Egypt. What followed was a contest that lasted, depending on the version, anywhere from 80 years to several centuries. The Egyptians described it in a text called The Contendings of Horus and Set, a manuscript dating to about 1190 to 1077 before the Common Era. It reads less like a sacred scripture and more like a courtroom drama mixed with a bar fight. The gods themselves served as judges. Ra presided over the tribunal. Thoth kept the records. Shu and the other members of the Ennead offered opinions, argued, changed their minds, and generally behaved the way any large committee behaves when trying to make a difficult decision. Ra himself seemed inclined toward Set at times, because Set was older and more powerful. But Isis argued fiercely for her son, and she was more clever than all of them. In one episode, Isis disguised herself as a beautiful woman and approached Set when he was alone. She told him a story about a widow whose son's inheritance had been stolen by a stranger. Set, not recognizing her, said, "That is unjust. The inheritance should go to the son." Isis revealed herself and said, "You have judged your own case." Set was humiliated, and the gods laughed. Horus and Set also fought physically. In one battle, Set tore out Horus's left eye. Horus's left eye was associated with the moon, and the Egyptians used this myth to explain why the moon goes through phases. It is damaged and then healed, waning and waxing, over and over. Thoth, the god of medicine and magic, restored the eye, and it became one of the most famous symbols in all of Egyptian art. The Eye of Horus. The Wedjat. You've probably seen it, a stylized human eye with a teardrop mark below it and a spiral underneath. It was painted on coffins, carved into amulets, and drawn on the prows of boats. It meant healing, protection, and the restoration of what was lost. In another episode, Horus cut off one of Set's body parts. The mythmakers were not squeamish about the details, though I'll spare you the specifics. There were also legal arguments, appeals, letters sent to the goddess Neith for her opinion, and at one point, a race in stone boats, which is exactly as impractical as it sounds. Horus built his boat out of wood and plastered it to look like stone. Set, being Set, actually built his from stone, and it sank immediately. Eventually, after what feels like an eternity of deliberation, the gods sided with Horus. He was given the throne of Egypt. Set was banished to the desert, to the red wasteland beyond the fertile land of the Nile, where he became the god of storms and foreigners, and everything that existed outside the ordered world of Ma'at. I want to pause here for a moment, because the story of Horus and Set is more than just a myth about gods. It was the foundation of Egyptian kingship for 3,000 years. Every pharaoh had 5 names, each one connecting him to a different aspect of divine authority. The first, and most important, was the Horus name, which identified the pharaoh as the living embodiment of Horus on earth. When a pharaoh sat on the throne, he was Horus. When he died, he became Osiris, and his successor became the new Horus. This created an unbroken chain of divine succession that stretched from the mythological past into the present day. It meant that every king, no matter how young or inexperienced, ruled with the authority of a god. The double crown of Egypt, the Peshent, combined the white Hedjet of Upper Egypt and the red Deshret of Lower Egypt. The pharaoh wore both, signifying his rule over the entire 2 lands. The crook and flail that he carried were the same ones that Osiris held, connecting the living king to the dead king, the present to the past, the world of the living to the world of the dead. The royal court was elaborate. The pharaoh was attended by viziers, scribes, priests, generals, and a vast bureaucracy that administered everything from grain storage to canal maintenance. Egypt was divided into 42 provinces called nomes, each governed by a nomarch who reported to the pharaoh. The number 42 was significant. It's the same number as the judges in the Hall of Two Truths, and the 42 negative confessions. Whether the administrative divisions inspired the mythology or the other way around, no one knows for certain. The pharaoh was not just a political leader. He was a religious figure, the intermediary between the gods and humanity. He performed daily rituals in the temples, making offerings to the gods, reciting prayers, and maintaining ma'at. If the pharaoh failed in this duty, if he was unjust or negligent, the Egyptians believed that the cosmic order would break down. The Nile would fail to flood, crops would wither, enemies would invade. Everything depended on the pharaoh doing his job. Some pharaohs took this more seriously than others. Ramses IV, who ruled for 66 years from about 1279 to 1213 before the Common Era, built more temples and monuments than any other pharaoh. He fathered more than 100 children. He fought the Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 before the Common Era, one of the largest chariot battles in ancient history, and then signed a peace treaty with them, one of the earliest known international peace agreements. He carved his name and image on nearly every available surface in Egypt. When he couldn't build something new, he carved his cartouche over the names of earlier pharaohs. Hatshepsut, who ruled during the 18th dynasty, around 1479 to 1458 before the Common Era, was one of the few women to become pharaoh. She wore the royal regalia, including the false ceremonial beard, and used the masculine form of the royal titles. Her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, cut into the cliffs on the west bank of the Nile near Luxor, is one of the most beautiful buildings in Egypt. It rises in 3 terraced levels, connected by long ramps, with colonnaded porticos at each level. The reliefs on its walls depict a trading expedition she sent to the land of Punt, a mysterious place that scholars believe was located somewhere on the coast of East Africa or the Arabian Peninsula. The expedition brought back incense trees, ebony, gold, and live baboons. Akhenaten, who ruled from about 1353 to 1336 before the Common Era, tried to abolish the entire traditional religion and replace it with the worship of a single god, the Aten, the visible disk of the sun. He closed the temples of Amun, moved the capital to a new city he built in the desert called Akhetaten, modern-day Amarna, and had the names and images of the old gods chiseled off of monuments throughout Egypt. After his death, the old religion was restored, and the Egyptians tried to erase Akhenaten from history. His name was removed from the official king lists. His city was abandoned and demolished. His memory was suppressed so thoroughly that he was only rediscovered by modern archaeologists in the 19th century. It was Akhenaten's son, or possibly his brother, a boy named Tutankhamun, who restored the old gods and changed his name to Tutankhamun, meaning the living image of Amun. A minor king who died young, a footnote in history, until Howard Carter found his tomb. The train sways gently. Outside, the landscape is completely flat. The Nile Valley at this point is only a few miles wide, a thin green strip between 2 walls of desert. Beyond the cultivated fields, the sand begins, and it doesn't stop until it reaches Libya to the west, or the Red Sea to the east. The ancient Egyptians lived in a narrow world, pressed between the water and the sand, and everything they built and believed and dreamed was shaped by that geography. And a new order was established. Horus ruled the living, Osiris ruled the dead. And every pharaoh who came after was considered a living Horus, the rightful king, with the power of the gods behind him. When a pharaoh died, he became Osiris, passing into the afterlife, and his successor became the new Horus. It was an endless chain, father to son, Osiris to Horus, death to life, stretching all the way from the mythological past to the last pharaoh of the last dynasty. The train sways gently as we pass through a small station. Nobody gets on, nobody gets off. Just a flash of fluorescent light, the name of a town in Arabic on a sign, and then darkness again. The click-clack of the wheels hasn't changed. It never changes. I want to talk about Anubis for a while. He's one of my favorites. He's the one with the jackal head, sleek, black, ears pointed straight up. If you've seen any picture of an Egyptian god, you've probably seen Anubis. I mentioned his origin earlier, the child of Osiris and Nephthys, abandoned and found by Isis. But in the earliest texts, the pyramid texts from the Old Kingdom, around 2660 to 2066 before the Common Era, Anubis is simply the son of Ra and the principal god of the dead. It was only later, as Osiris rose to prominence and took over the role of Lord of the Underworld, that Anubis was reassigned. He became the god of embalming, the god of mummification, the one who prepared the dead for their journey. The Egyptians associated jackals with death because they observed jackals scavenging in cemeteries. It was a practical connection. The animal that lingered near the dead became the protector of the dead. One of Anubis's titles was "He who is upon his mountain," meaning he guarded the tombs from above. Another was Lord of the Sacred Land, referring to the desert necropolis where the dead were buried. Anubis was depicted with black skin, not because jackals are black, but because black was the color of regeneration and life. It was the color of the rich Nile silt, the black land of Kemet. It symbolized rebirth. There is something nice about that. The god of the dead, wearing the color of life. Now, about mummification itself. 1. I want to slow down here because this is one of those things that sounds gruesome in a textbook, but becomes something else entirely when you understand why they did it. The Egyptians believed that the body was a home for the soul, not just a container, but a home. They believed in multiple aspects of the self. The Ka was the life force, a kind of spiritual double that remained in the tomb and needed offerings of food and drink. The Ba was the personality, the unique character of the individual, depicted as a bird with a human head. The Ba could fly out of the tomb during the day and return to the body at night. And the Ak was the spirit that traveled through the underworld to reach the afterlife. If the body was destroyed, the Ka had no home. The Ba had no anchor. The Ak could not complete its journey. Everything fell apart. So they preserved the body, not out of morbidity, but out of love, out of care, out of the belief that the people they had lost were still, in some essential way, present. The mummification process took 70 days. The best preserved mummies come from the 18th through the 20th dynasties, roughly 1570 to 1075 before the Common Era. This is the period of Tutankhamun, of Ramesses the Great, of the most elaborate tombs in the Valley of the Kings. First, the body was washed and purified. This happened as soon as possible after death, because decomposition began quickly in the Egyptian heat. Then the embalmers, who were priests wearing the mask of Anubis, the jackal-headed god, began their work. They inserted a long, hooked instrument through the nose, perforating a thin bone called the ethmoid, and pulled out the brain in small pieces. The brain was discarded. The Egyptians did not understand its function. They believed the heart was the seat of thought, memory, and emotion, so the heart was always left in place. Next, an incision was made on the left side of the abdomen, and the internal organs were removed. The lungs, the liver, the stomach, and the intestines were each treated separately. They were washed, dried with natron, a naturally occurring salt found in dry lake beds, and placed into separate containers called canopic jars. Each jar had a lid shaped like one of the 4 sons of Horus, each one a protector of a different organ. Imseti, with a human head, protected the liver. Hapi, with a baboon head, guarded the lungs. Duamutef, with a jackal head, watched over the stomach. And Kebasenuif, with a falcon head, safeguarded the intestines. The empty body cavity was filled with bags of natron. The entire body was covered in natron as well, and left to dry for 35 to 40 days. Natron is a kind of natural desiccant. It absorbs moisture from the body the way silica gel absorbs moisture from a shoebox. After the drying period, what remained was a body that was shrunken and stiff, but intact. The skin was preserved. The features were still recognizable. The body was then washed again and anointed with cedar oil, myrrh, juniper oil, and other fragrant resins. Sometimes beeswax was used to make the dried skin more supple. The body cavity was stuffed with linen, sawdust, or sand to restore a more natural shape. And then came the wrapping. Layer after layer of linen bandages with amulets tucked between the layers for protection. Small scarab beetles carved from stone or clay. The eye of Horus. Figurines of gods. A heart scarab was placed over the chest, inscribed with a spell from the Book of the Dead that would prevent the heart from betraying the dead person at the final judgment. The whole thing was a ritual. Every step had a prayer. Every gesture had meaning. And at the very end, a priest performed the opening of the mouth ceremony, touching the mummy's face with special tools, including an adze and a serpent-shaped wand, so that the dead person could breathe, eat, drink, and speak in the next world. Without this ceremony, the mummy was just a preserved body. With it, the mummy was a vessel, ready for the soul's return. In 1994, a team of researchers led by Dr. Bob Breyer at Long Island University actually performed a full Egyptian mummification on a donated human cadaver, using replicas of ancient copper and obsidian tools and following the methods described by Herodotus. The experiment lasted 35 days and confirmed many details of the ancient process. It was, as far as anyone knows, the first time in modern history that someone had attempted a true Egyptian-style mummification. It is a lot of effort for someone who has already died. But I think that's the point. It was an act of devotion that said, "You are not gone. You are still here. We will take care of you." Outside the window, the desert is getting closer. You can feel it in the air, even through the glass. It is drier now. The stars are brighter. We're moving further from the city, further from the green strip of the Nile Valley and into the open country of Upper Egypt. The ancient Egyptians called this region Waset. The Greeks called it Thebes. Today we call it Luxor. It was the capital of Egypt during the New Kingdom, and it is where the greatest temples and tombs were built. You don't need to follow every word. The train will carry us either way. Now I want to tell you about what happened after the mummification, after the burial, after the tomb was sealed and the mourners went home, after the last prayer was spoken and the last tear was wiped away. What happened to the soul? The Egyptians called their afterlife guide the Book of the Dead. That's our name for it, actually. A 19th century German Egyptologist named Carl Richard Lepsius gave it that title. The Egyptians called it something more beautiful. They called it the Book of Coming Forth by Day. Because the whole point was not death. The whole point was coming back to the light. It was not a single book. There was no one official version, no standard text that every Egyptian received. It was a collection of spells, prayers, hymns, and instructions, about 192 of them known to us today, written on papyrus scrolls and placed inside the coffin with the dead person. Each scroll was customized. Wealthy people could afford longer, more elaborate versions with vivid painted illustrations. Poorer people might get a shorter selection, or sometimes just a few key spells written on the linen wrappings of the mummy itself. Some of the longest surviving scrolls are extraordinary. The Greenfield Papyrus, now in the British Museum, measures 37 meters. That is longer than the length of 2 cricket pitches laid end to end. The Papyrus of Ani, also in the British Museum, dates to about 1250 before the Common Era and is one of the most beautifully illustrated manuscripts ever found. It was made for a man named Ani, a scribe and administrator who held the title True Scribe of the King and overseer of the double granary of the Lord of Tower. His wife was named Tutu, and she appears alongside him in many of the painted scenes, wearing fine white linen and a broad collar. The spells in the Book of the Dead were practical. They told the dead person what to say when they encountered a locked gate guarded by a knife-wielding deity. They warned about the serpents and crocodiles that lurked in the underworld. They provided the correct names and passwords for each dangerous region. Without the right words, a gate would not open. Without the right spell, a demon might attack. The afterlife was imagined as a journey full of hazards, and the Book of the Dead was the map. The earliest versions of these spells date back to the Old Kingdom, around 2400 to 2300 before the Common Era, when they were carved directly onto the walls of the pharaoh's burial chamber inside the pyramid. These are called the Pyramid Texts, and they are the oldest religious writings in the world. Only pharaohs were entitled to them. They contain spells to help the dead king ascend to the sky and join the circumpolar stars, the stars that never set below the horizon, which the Egyptians called the imperishable ones. During the Middle Kingdom, around 2160 to 1580 before the Common Era, the spells migrated from the pyramid walls to the inner surfaces of wooden coffins. These are called the coffin texts, and they were available to a wider range of people. not just pharaohs, but also nobles, officials, and wealthy commoners. The democratization of the afterlife had begun. You no longer had to be a king to hope for eternal life. You just had to be able to afford a coffin with the right spells painted on it. By the New Kingdom, around 1550 before the Common Era, the spells had been collected, revised, and transferred to papyrus scrolls, creating what we now call the Book of the Dead. This was the most accessible version yet. Professional scribes produced copies of varying quality, and families would purchase a scroll for their deceased relative, sometimes with the dead person's name written in the blanks. It was, in a sense, a commercial product, an off-the-shelf ticket to the afterlife. But it was also deeply personal. The choice of which spells to include, which illustrations to add, and how elaborate the scroll should be reflected both the family's wealth and their particular concerns about the journey ahead. The underworld itself was imagined as a real place with geography. There were rivers to cross, fields to walk through, gates to pass, and caverns to navigate. Some regions were scorching hot, lit by the fires of serpents. Others were pitch black, places where even the sun god could not see. Some were tranquil, with gentle waters and fields of grain, previews of the paradise that awaited at the end of the journey. The Egyptians mapped these regions with the same attention to detail that they mapped the physical world. There were also lesser-known texts that served similar purposes. The Book of Gates described the journey through 12 gates in the underworld, each one guarded by fire-breathing serpents. The Book of Caverns divided the underworld into 6 caverns, each containing both the blessed dead and the damned. The Book of the Earth, found in later royal tombs, described the regeneration of the sun god in the depths of the underworld, with elaborate illustrations of gods and demons engaged in the eternal process of renewal. The Egyptians did not believe in a single, fixed version of the afterlife. Different texts offered different maps, different challenges, different destinations. This was not a contradiction to them. It was simply the way truth worked. The afterlife was too vast and too complex to be captured in any one description. Each text illuminated a different facet of a reality that was, ultimately, beyond human comprehension. The train is still moving. The wheels are still turning. We have a long way to go yet, and there is no reason to rush. One spell protected against being turned upside down, which the Egyptians considered a terrible fate because it meant your digestive process would work in reverse. Another spell ensured that you would not have to drink unclean water. Another allowed you to transform into a golden falcon and fly out of the underworld if things went badly. The Egyptians, for all their solemnity, were also eminently practical. They planned for contingencies. But the most important section was chapter 125, the weighing of the heart. After navigating the perils of the underworld, the dead person arrived in the Hall of Two Truths. This was a vast chamber, presided over by Osiris, who sat on his throne at the far end, green-skinned and wrapped in white, the crook and flail crossed on his chest. Above him, seated on thrones along the top of the chamber, were the great gods: Ra-Horakhti, Atum, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, Isis, Nephthys, Horus, and Hathor. 42 divine judges lined the walls, each one responsible for a different moral transgression. Some had the heads of animals. Some carried blades. Each had a name that the dead person had to know. And in the center of the hall stood a golden scale. The dead person had to stand before the 42 judges and recite what are known as the negative confessions. Each confession began with the words, "I have not. I have not stolen. I have not lied. I have not killed. I have not polluted the water of the Nile. I have not caused suffering. I have not been angry without reason. I have not eavesdropped. I have not caused anyone to weep. I have not been excessively proud." There were 42 of them, one for each judge, and the dead person had to deny each sin by name. There was no complete, fixed list. Different versions of the Book of the Dead contained different confessions, tailored perhaps to the values of the time or the character of the deceased. Then came the weighing. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, knelt beside the golden scale. He took the dead person's heart and placed it on one pan. On the other pan, he placed a single feather. This was the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice and cosmic order. Ma'at was not just a goddess, she was a concept. She represented the fundamental balance of the universe, the rightness of things, the way things are supposed to be. Her feather was the lightest thing imaginable. The heart, the Egyptians believed, was the organ of thought and memory and emotion. It recorded everything you had done in your life, every kindness and every cruelty, every truth and every lie. It was the seat of your character. That is why it was left inside the body during mummification, when all the other organs were removed. It was too important. It was you. If the heart was lighter than the feather, or balanced perfectly against it, the dead person had lived a good life, a life in harmony with Ma'at. Thoth, standing nearby in his ibis-headed form, with his scribe's palette and reed pen, recorded the result. He turned to the assembled gods and declared the verdict, and Osiris smiled and welcomed the soul into the afterlife. The afterlife was called the Field of Reeds, or the Aru. It was imagined as a place very much like the one you left. Blue skies, gentle rivers, boats for sailing, fields that needed plowing and harvesting, though the work was never hard, and the dead person could use shabti figurines, little servant statues buried with them, to do the labor on their behalf. There were trees to sit beneath, cool water to drink, a sycamore tree providing shade. An Egyptian tomb inscription from about 1400 before the Common Era reads, "May I walk every day on the banks of my water. May my soul rest on the branches of the trees which I have planted. May I refresh myself in the shadow of my sycamore." But if the heart was heavier than the feather, weighed down by wrongdoing, cruelty, dishonesty, or regret, then something terrible happened. Sitting behind the scale, waiting with terrible patience, was a creature called Ammit. She had the head of a crocodile, the front body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus, combining the three most dangerous animals the Egyptians knew. She was the devourer, the eater of hearts, and she ate the heart. The soul whose heart was consumed by Ammit ceased to exist. No afterlife, no field of reeds, no reunion with loved ones, just nothing. The Egyptians called this the second death, and it was the worst fate they could imagine. Not pain, not punishment, not fire or ice, just erasure, being forgotten entirely. Many people were so afraid of this moment that they had spell 30b from the Book of the Dead inscribed on a heart scarab amulet and placed on their chest. The spell was addressed directly to the heart, asking it not to betray the deceased. "Do not stand against me as a witness," it said. "Do not oppose me in the tribunal." Even in death, the Egyptians tried to give themselves every possible advantage. I think the weighing of the heart tells you something important about how the Egyptians understood morality. They didn't believe that the gods wanted blind obedience. They didn't believe in a system of eternal punishment for sinners, no hell of fire and suffering. What they believed was much simpler and maybe more profound. Live well, be kind, keep your heart light, and at the end, your own heart would speak for you, not your words, not your wealth, not your title or your tomb, your heart. The train has slowed a little. We must be passing through a town. I can see low buildings in the distance, a few lights still on. A dog barks somewhere far away, and then we're past it, picking up speed again. Let me tell you about Thoth. I mentioned him earlier, the ibis-headed god who stood by the scales and recorded the verdict. But Thoth was much more than a scribe. The Egyptians believed that Thoth invented writing. All of it. Hieroglyphs, the sacred script carved on temple walls, those beautiful pictorial symbols that mystified the world for centuries, until a French scholar named Jean-François Champollion decoded them in 1822 using the Rosetta Stone. Thoth was also credited with inventing mathematics, astronomy, medicine, music, and the calendar. Before Thoth, the Egyptian year was 360 days long, but Nut, the sky goddess, had been cursed by Ra and forbidden from giving birth on any day of the existing year. So Thoth gambled with the moon god Khonsu in a game of dice. He won 1/72 of the moon's light, which added up to 5 extra days. These 5 days were added to the calendar, making it 365 days, and on those 5 days, Nut gave birth to her 5 children: Osiris, Horus the Elder, Set, Isis, and Nephthys. Egyptian astronomers eventually refined this further, adjusting the year to exactly 365 1/4 days, which is remarkably close to the true length of a solar year. The Egyptians called Thoth by the name Jehuti, which means he who is like the ibis. The ibis was a tall, wading bird with a long, curved beak, and the Egyptians associated that curved shape with the crescent moon. Thoth was a moon god, as well as a god of writing. His temple was at Hermopolis, a city the Egyptians called Kemenu. During the late period of Egyptian history, when Khmenu became the capital, the cult of Thoth grew enormously in popularity. Millions of ibises were mummified and buried in his honor. Archaeologists have found vast underground galleries at places like Tuna el Jebel, packed wall to wall with the mummified bodies of ibises, stacked in stone niches, thousands upon thousands of them. Scribes, the literate class of Egyptian society, considered Thoth their patron saint, if the Egyptians had had saints. Before beginning their daily work, many scribes would pour out a single drop of ink as an offering to him. Being a scribe was a privileged position. Training began in childhood and was available mainly to the sons of the elite. A competent scribe could rise to great influence. The name Tuthmosa, borne by several pharaohs, means born of Thoth. The Greeks, when they encountered Thoth, identified him with their own god Hermes, the messenger and trickster. They combined the two into a figure called Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes the thrice great, and attributed to him a body of philosophical and mystical writings that influenced European thought for centuries, long after the last temple of Thoth had crumbled into the desert. We're still moving. The Nile is still out there, somewhere to our left, hidden in the dark. If your eyelids are closed, good. If they're open, that's fine too. Before I tell you about Hathor and Sekhmet, let me take a small detour. I want to talk about two more things that I think belong in this story: the Great Sphinx and the temple complex at Karnak. The Great Sphinx of Giza is the largest monolith statue in the world. It crouches on the Giza Plateau, facing east, watching the sun rise every morning. It has the body of a lion and the head of a human, probably representing the pharaoh Khafre, who built the second largest pyramid at Giza around 2520 before the Common Era. The statue is carved from a single ridge of natural limestone bedrock. It is about 240 feet long from paw to tail, about 66 feet high from base to the top of the head, and about 62 feet wide at its broadest point. The Sphinx has no nose. The popular story says Napoleon's troops shot it off with a cannon. But sketches made before Napoleon's arrival in 1798 already show the nose missing. The 15th century Arab historian al-Makrizi recorded that a Sufi named Muhammad Saim al-Dar damaged the face in 1378 because he was outraged that local peasants were making offerings to the statue. Whatever the cause, the missing nose gives the Sphinx a quality of patient endurance, as though it has seen so much that the loss of one small part doesn't matter anymore. For most of its history, the Sphinx has been buried up to its shoulders in sand. The desert kept reclaiming it. Pharaoh Thutmose IV, who ruled around 1400 before the Common Era, left a granite stela between the Sphinx's paws, describing a dream he had as a young prince. He fell asleep in the shadow of the Sphinx, and the statue spoke to him, promising that if Thutmose cleared the sand away, he would become pharaoh. Thutmose did, and he did. Whether the dream came first or the story came after, it tells you something about how the Egyptians related to their monuments. They didn't just build them and walk away. They talked to them. Now, Karnak. The temple complex at Karnak, on the east bank of the Nile near Luxor, is the largest religious complex ever built. It covers about 200 acres. Construction began during the Middle Kingdom, around 2000 before the Common Era, and continued for more than 1,500 years, with nearly every pharaoh adding something. Thutmose I added pylons. Hatshepsut added obelisks. Thutmose III added a festival hall. Amenhotep III built the Great Colonnade. Ramses II, who never met a surface he didn't want to carve his name on, added extensively. The most impressive part of Karnak is the Great Hypostyle Hall. It contains 134 massive columns arranged in 16 rows. The tallest columns stand 69 feet high and are about 33 feet in circumference, so wide that it would take 6 people with outstretched arms to encircle one. The tops of the columns are carved in the shape of open papyrus flowers. When the hall was intact, with its roof in place and sunlight filtering through stone window grills high above, the effect must have been like standing in a forest of stone trees, with shafts of light falling through the canopy. Every surface was carved and painted. The walls are covered in scenes of pharaohs making offerings to the gods, military victories, and religious processions. Originally, all of this was painted in brilliant colors, reds and blues and greens and golds. Fragments of the original paint can still be seen in protected corners where the sun and wind haven't worn it away. The sacred lake at Karnak, a rectangular pool of water that the priests use for ritual purification, is still there today, still holding water. It is about 393 feet long and 252 feet wide. Priests bathed in it twice during the day and twice during the night. Geese sacred to the god Amun were kept on its shores. Karnak was dedicated primarily to Amun, who during the New Kingdom was merged with Ra to become Amun-Ra, the king of the gods. The name Amun means the hidden one. He was associated with the wind because wind is felt but not seen. His temple at Karnak was the wealthiest institution in ancient Egypt. At its peak, it owned more land, more cattle, and employed more workers than any other entity in the country. The train passes through another quiet station. No one gets on or off, just the brief flash of a platform lamp, and then it's gone, swallowed by the dark. Let me tell you now about 2 goddesses who are connected in a way that I find beautiful and a little frightening. Their names are Hathor and Sekhmet, and the story of how they are connected begins with Ra. In the early days, when Ra still ruled over the earth as pharaoh, he grew old. His bones ached, his eyes dimmed, his limbs became stiff, and the humans he had created began to lose their respect for him. They whispered among themselves. They plotted. They said that the sun god was weak, that he was no longer fit to rule. Ra was angry. He summoned his daughter, an aspect of his own divine power called the Eye of Ra, and sent her to Earth to punish the humans who had conspired against him. the Eye of Ra took the form of Sekhmet, the lioness goddess. Her name means the powerful one. She had the body of a woman and the head of a lioness, with a sun disk blazing on her crown and a cobra rearing above her forehead. Sekhmet was not gentle. She descended upon the rebels like fire. She tore them apart with her claws. She waded through their blood. The fields turned red. And she did not stop. She could not stop. The taste of blood had driven her into a frenzy, a killing rage that went beyond justice into annihilation. She moved from village to village, beyond the rebels, beyond the guilty, into the innocent. Ra watched from above and was horrified. He had wanted justice, not extinction. He wanted her to stop, but Sekhmet would not listen. She was rage made flesh, and she was beyond anyone's control. So Ra devised a plan. According to some versions, it was Thoth who suggested the idea. Ra ordered 7,000 jars of beer to be brewed. Then he had the beer dyed red with pomegranate juice. In the middle of the night, while Sekhmet slept, Ra had the red beer poured out across the fields where she would hunt the next day. When Sekhmet woke, she saw what she thought was a vast lake of blood. She drank. She drank all of it. 7,000 jars of beer. And she became so drunk that she fell asleep for 3 days. When she woke up, the bloodlust was gone. She was no longer Sekhmet. She had transformed. She was Hathor. Hathor was everything Sekhmet was not. She was the goddess of love, music, dance, joy, beer, motherhood, and fertility. She was depicted as a beautiful woman with cow ears, or sometimes as a cow itself, gentle and nourishing, her udders flowing with milk. Her main temple was at Dendera in Upper Egypt, one of the best preserved temples in all of Egypt, where the columns are carved with her face, serene and round, gazing out from every capital. The ceiling of the temple at Dendera is famous for its astronomical decorations, a circular zodiac that is now in the Louvre. The Egyptians celebrated the transformation of Sekhmet into Hathor every year with a great festival of drinking. They drank beer dyed with pomegranate juice and danced and played sistra, rattling instruments sacred to Hathor. And they did it in memory of the day when beer saved the human race from destruction. Archaeologist Betsy Bryan from Johns Hopkins University, excavating at the Temple of Mut in Luxor, found evidence of these festivals. She discovered illustrations showing priestesses being served enormous quantities of alcohol, and temple attendants helping those who had overindulged. Historical records suggest tens of thousands of people attended. Pharaoh Amenhotep III, who ruled during the 18th dynasty, built hundreds of statues of Sekhmet at the Temple of Mut in Karnak. Archaeologists have found approximately 700 of them, larger than life, carved from dark granite. It is thought there was one for every day of the year, and offerings were made before each statue daily. The sheer number suggests either a deep reverence for the goddess, or a deep fear of her, or perhaps both. The train crosses another bridge. This one is longer. You can hear the hollow echo of the wheels on the iron beams. And if you pressed your face to the window, you might see the silver surface of the Nile far below, catching the moonlight. Then the sound changes back, and we are on solid ground again. I want to tell you about the pyramids now. Not the mythology exactly, but the facts, because the facts are strange enough. The very first pyramid was built around 2780 before the Common Era by an architect named Imhotep for King Djoser. Before Imhotep, pharaohs were buried in flat-topped rectangular structures called mastabas, from the Arabic word for bench. Imhotep stacked 6 mastabas on top of each other, each one smaller than the one below, creating the step pyramid at Saqqara. It still stands today, the oldest monumental stone structure in the world. Imhotep was later deified. He became the god of medicine and architecture, the only non-royal Egyptian ever to achieve divine status. The transition to true pyramids, the ones with smooth, sloping sides, happened during the reign of Snefru, the founder of the 4th dynasty. Snefru built at least 3 pyramids. One at Meidum started as a step pyramid and was later filled in to create smooth sides. One at Dashur started with steep sides but became unstable during construction, so the builders reduced the angle partway up, creating what we now call the bent pyramid. The third, the red pyramid, also at Dashur, was the first true smooth-sided pyramid, built at a relatively low angle of 43 degrees. Snefru's son was Khufu, and Khufu built the Great Pyramid at Giza. The Great Pyramid was completed around 2560 before the Common Era. It was the tallest structure in the world for nearly 4,000 years, until the spire of Lincoln Cathedral in England surpassed it in the 14th century. When it was finished, it stood about 481 feet high, or 147 meters. Today, because the fine white limestone casing was stripped away during the Middle Ages to build mosques and houses in Cairo, it stands about 450 feet. The base covers more than 13 acres, the equivalent of about 6 football fields. Each side is about 756 feet long. The base is level to within 2 centimeters across that entire area, comparable to the accuracy possible with modern laser leveling equipment. The sides are precisely oriented to the 4 cardinal directions of the compass. It was built from about 2.3 million blocks of stone, with a total weight of roughly 6 million tons. Most of the stone was quarried locally from the Giza Plateau itself, but the fine white Tura limestone for the casing came from quarries across the Nile, and the granite blocks for the King's Chamber structure were transported from Aswan, more than 560 miles to the south. Some of those granite blocks weigh up to 80 tons. The builders had no wheels, no pulleys, and no iron tools. They used copper chisels, stone hammers, wooden sledges, ramps, and a great deal of human effort. In 2013, a team of French archaeologists led by Pierre Tallet found something remarkable in a cave at Wadi al-Jarf near the Red Sea. They discovered a set of papyrus rolls, more than 4,500 years old, written by a man named Merer. Merer was a foreman who led a crew of about 40 workers. His diary recorded the daily work of transporting limestone from the quarries at Tura to Giza. His team made 3 round trips every 10 days. They loaded the stone onto boats, floated them up the Nile, and delivered them to a harbor that had been dug at the base of the Giza Plateau. The Diary of Mirir is the oldest known papyrus ever found. It is the only first-hand account we have from someone who actually worked on the Great Pyramid. And in his notes, he doesn't describe the work as slavery or punishment. He records it the way a foreman records any job. Deliveries made, schedules kept, supplies used. The workers were not slaves. Modern archaeology has confirmed this. Mark Lehner and Zahi Hawass discovered a workers' village at Giza in the 1980s and 90s. They found bakeries, breweries, workshops, and living quarters. They found animal bones showing the workers were fed beef, which was expensive, not just bread and onions. They found evidence of medical care and a workers' cemetery where multiple generations of the same families were buried, suggesting that pyramid building was a source of pride, not shame. The logistics of the construction were staggering. The site needed a functioning harbor connected to the Nile by canals to receive the stone shipments. It needed bakeries producing thousands of loaves of bread per day. It needed breweries, butcheries, workshops for tool making, housing for the permanent staff, and barracks for the rotating crews. A 2012 study from Aix-Marseille University showed that the ancient Nile had a now extinct branch called the Ahramat branch that once flowed much closer to the Giza Plateau than the modern river, making it far easier to transport the massive blocks by boat directly to the construction site. A more recent study, published in 2024, mapped this extinct branch in detail, confirming that the pyramids were deliberately built along its banks. The water has long since receded, leaving the pyramids stranded in the desert, miles from the nearest waterway. But 4,500 years ago, stood at the edge of a busy port. The workers were paid in bread and beer. A supervisor received 4 jugs of beer per day. A regular worker received 1. Stanford engineer Craig Smith estimated the workforce consumed more than 3.3 million jugs of beer per year. A brewery operated on site. And here is one more detail about Khufu that I find oddly touching. He built the largest pyramid in the world. He commissioned the tallest building on Earth for nearly 4,000 years. And yet, the only surviving statue of him is a tiny figurine made of ivory, just 7.5 centimeters tall, about the size of your thumb. It was found far from Giza, at Abydos. He has a round face and a calm expression. That is all we have of the man who built the biggest thing on the planet. The conductor just dimmed the lights another notch. A good time to talk about Tutankhamun. In 1922, a British archaeologist named Howard Carter was working in the Valley of the Kings near Luxor. He had been searching for the tomb of a minor pharaoh named Tutankhamun for 5 years, funded by a wealthy Englishman named Lord Carnarvon. Carnarvon was running out of patience and money. He told Carter that he would fund 1 more season of digging, and that was it. Carter returned to the valley and began excavating a patch of ground he had ignored in previous years, beneath a group of ancient workers' huts near the entrance to the tomb of Ramses VI. On the morning of November 4th, 1922, Carter arrived at the site to find his workers unusually quiet. He feared there had been an accident. Instead, his foreman, an Egyptian man named Ahmed Gedigar, told him they had found a step cut into the bedrock, hidden beneath the sand and rubble of centuries. They dug. More steps appeared, 16 of them descending into the rock. At the bottom was a doorway, sealed with limestone and plaster, stamped with seal impressions. Carter could make out the name Tutankhamun in the cartouches. His heart must have been pounding. But he was disciplined. He sent a telegram to Carnarvon, who was in England, asking him to come at once. Then he had the workers fill the stairway back in with sand and rubble to protect the find, and waited. Carnarvon arrived on November 23rd with his daughter, Lady Evelyn Herbert. They cleared the stairway again. They removed the first sealed door. Behind it was a corridor filled with rubble. At the end of the corridor was a second sealed door. On November 26, 1922, Carter made a small hole in the upper left corner of that door. He used a chisel that his grandmother had given him for his 17th birthday. He held up a candle and peered through the hole. The hot air escaping from the tomb made the candle flicker. Then it steadied. Lord Carnarvon, standing behind him, asked, "Can you see anything?" Carter said, "Yes, wonderful things." He was looking at a room that had not been opened in more than 3,000 years. Tutankhamun had been buried around 1323 before the Common Era and forgotten. His small tomb, designated KV62, had been buried under debris from the construction of later tombs. Ancient robbers had broken in at least twice, but guards had caught them and resealed the entrance. Inside the antechamber were more than 600 objects. Gold-covered chariots, elaborately carved alabaster vessels, inlaid furniture, walking sticks, a golden throne, beds in the shape of animals, their gilded surfaces catching the candlelight, clothing, food, games, everything a pharaoh might need in the afterlife. And behind another sealed doorway, guarded by 2 life-size statues of the king in black and gold, they found the burial chamber. Inside it was a set of 4 gilded wooden shrines, nested one inside another, nearly filling the entire room. Inside the innermost shrine was a stone sarcophagus. Inside the sarcophagus were 3 coffins, also nested, each one more magnificent than the last. The innermost coffin was made of solid gold and weighed 110 kilograms, about 243 pounds. Inside it lay the mummy of Tutankhamun himself, his face covered by a mask of solid gold, with eyes of obsidian and quartz, inlaid with lapis lazuli and colored glass. The tomb contained more than 5,000 objects in total. It took Carter 10 years to catalog and remove them all. Every object had to be photographed, recorded, stabilized, and carefully transported. Harry Burton, a British archaeological photographer on loan from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, took more than 1,400 photographs documenting the process. Tutankhamun was a minor king. He came to the throne around the age of 9 and died around 19, after a reign of only about 10 years. He was probably the son of Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh who tried to replace all the Egyptian gods with a single deity, the Aten, the sun disk. When Tutankhamun became king, the old religion was restored. The temples reopened. The gods came back. If his small, hastily prepared tomb contained that much treasure, it is hard to imagine what was inside the tombs of great pharaohs like Ramesses the Great, whose tombs were emptied by grave robbers thousands of years before. Lord Carnarvon died on April 5, 1923, from blood poisoning, probably caused by an infected mosquito bite that he nicked while shaving. The newspapers blamed the curse of the pharaoh. They reported that at the moment of Carnarvon's death, all the lights in Cairo went out. They said his dog in England howled and died at the same hour. The stories were exaggerated or invented, but the legend of the curse caught the world's imagination and has never let go. Carter, who had actually opened the tomb, lived until 1939. He was 64. He died in London of lymphoma in his own bed, with no curse involved. We're getting close now. I can feel the train settling into a deeper, steadier rhythm, the way a breath slows when someone is finally falling asleep. The Nile is still out there. It has been flowing for longer than any civilization that has ever lived beside it. The Nile River is about 4,130 miles long. It passes through 11 countries. It begins in the highlands of East Africa and ends in the Mediterranean Sea. Today, 95% of Egypt's population lives within a few miles of its banks, just as they have for 5,000 years. The ancient Egyptians divided their year into 3 seasons based on the Nile's behavior. Akhet was the flood season, when the river overflowed its banks, depositing rich silt on the fields. Peret was the growing season, when the soil was fertile and the crops sprang up. And Shamu was the harvest season, when the crops were gathered and the river was low and the desert heat returned. They saw everything in pairs, in balance, in the constant pull between one thing and its opposite. Green and red, fertile and barren, living and dead. Hathor and Sekhmet, Osiris and Set, Horus and the desert. And they believed that as long as those pairs stayed in balance, the world would continue. Ra would sail, the Nile would flood, the wheat would grow, the dead would wake in the field of reeds. I think there is something comforting in that. The idea that the world is not random, that behind the darkness, something is working, that every night, no matter how long it feels, the sun comes back. The stars outside the window are very bright now. We are deep in Upper Egypt, far from any city. The sky is enormous. The Egyptians knew the stars well. They mapped the constellations. They built their temples in alignment with the movements of the heavens. The great temples at Karnak were oriented so that on the winter solstice, the setting sun would shine directly through the central corridor and illuminate the innermost sanctuary. At Giza, during the summer solstice, the sun sets precisely between the Great Pyramid and the Pyramid of Khafre, as seen from the Great Sphinx. They were paying attention. That's what I keep coming back to. In everything they did, from the smallest amulet to the largest pyramid, they were paying attention to the world around them and trying to understand it. They watched the ibis and saw the moon. They watched the scarab beetle and saw the sun. They watched the Nile rise and fall and saw the cycle of life and death and renewal. They watched the jackal at the edge of the cemetery and saw a god. The cabin is very quiet now. The lamp above the window casts its warm circle of light. The seat is soft. The air is dry and still. Outside, the desert stretches away to the west, silver under the moon, and the Nile flows south to north, the way it has for millions of years, carrying silt and water and whatever stories the current picks up along the way. The train rocks gently. The wheels keep their rhythm. Click, clack, click, clack, like a clock that doesn't care about time. Somewhere up ahead, Ra is fighting Apophis in the depths of the Duat. Set is standing at the prow of the sunboat, driving his spear into the serpent of chaos. Thoth is recording the battle in careful hieroglyphs. Isis is watching over everything the way she always does, keeping the pieces together, holding the world in place with nothing but patience and love, and a spell or two. Anubis is tending to the dead, wrapping them carefully, placing amulets between the layers of linen, making sure they are ready for the journey. And Osiris is sitting on his throne in the Hall of Two Truths, waiting with the scales, the feather, and all the time in the world. The train will carry us the rest of the way. You don't need to do anything now. You don't need to remember anything. The gods have it covered. If your eyelids are heavy, let them close. If your breathing has slowed, let it slow. If your mind is drifting, let it drift. You are on a train, moving through the oldest country in the world, along the oldest river, under the oldest stars. And the story is the same story it has always been. Someone loved someone. Someone lost someone. Someone went looking and found them and put the pieces back together. And life went on. The lamp above the window flickers once, then steadies. The wheels turn. The Nile flows. Everything is fine. If this journey helped you rest tonight, maybe you'd like to ride with us again sometime. Good night.